5th of December, this and every year, is what?
World Competition Day.
World Competition Day. This is not for athletics. It is not for football.
No.
It is not competing for chess.
No.
It is not competing in political competition.
No.
Okay. We'll hear all about it. We are joined by a gentleman called Boniface Makongo. He's back in the studio. He's a Director, Competition and Consumer Protection at the Competition Authority of Kenya. Boniface, good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation again.
Thanks for having me.
The hot seat of the Situation Room. Karibu sana.
Asante.
You just said hello to CT as he was leaving. Unfortunately, CT is a little bit under the weather today, so he's like, let me just go and nikajisikilize kidogo. So he stepped out and he's left me with a proverb. I'm going to give you the proverb. It's from Eritrea. An old man who carries a load on his head and another in his arm played a lot when he was young.
Okay, maybe I would hazard a guess.
Yeah.
Maybe the proverb implies that you should prepare for old age when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that that is the best I can do.
Say again.
Yeah, you should prepare for old age. So the more active you are in your youth, the more prepared you will be for your old age.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And the lighter the load you'll have to
later
carry.
on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well said.
Okay.
Well
We're
said.
waiting for you.
Kabisa. There are people who do not know that we have an authority in Kenya called the Competition Authority.
Yes.
Please introduce it to them.
Yes. Competition Authority is a state corporation. We are charged with regulation of both the market structure and market conduct. And we also equally have a consumer protection mandate. So when I say market structure, it's basically how entities are aligned in any particular sector. So market structure, say the media would be your radios, would be your television stations, would be your newspapers, the companies that operate in that space.
Okay.
So with the regulation of market structure, we have a merger approval process. So if, for instance, Standard is acquiring, say, Star or some other company in the media space, you have to seek our approval. And we're going to, of course, review the transaction with a view of ensuring that we don't create a monopoly situation, or encourage dominance, because that has a negative impact on the consumer. With regard to market conduct, we investigate and sanction cartels or instances where entities who are supposed to be competing are agreeing on pricing, are agreeing on allocating markets, or if a firm is dominant, and in our context, dominance is a firm which has over 50% of the market share in any particular sector, either providing goods or a service. If that firm is engaged in, things like predatory pricing, and related issues also, or imposing, conditions that are not necessary, for particular transactions. Those are some of the things that then we look at, we investigate and sanction. And with regard to market conduct, we are allowed by the law to actually impose a penalty of up to 10% of a firm's preceding year's turnover. With the last aspect of our mandate, of course, also I have forgotten to mention, we also have abuse of BiPower as part of our mandate. That was an additional mandate area that was the authorities empowered to investigate and sanction cases of abuse of BiPower. And BiPower basically speaks to the terms that are imposed on an undertaking. So, for instance, you require a supermarket to access the market.
Yeah.
And they're imposing on you conditions that make it very difficult for you to operate. They are not paying you on time. You agree that the credit period is 90 days. But when the 90 days lapse, you're told, okay, we'll pay you in another time. Or you're told, suppliers more goods that then will sell and pay you. That kind of thing. That's abuse of BiPower. And lastly, the consumer protection mandate, where basically we look at things like false and misleading conduct in terms of, you go to purchase a product and you're told that it has certain characteristics which it turns out not to have. We also look at unconscionable conduct, where you're looking at, say, you're seeking a financial facility from a bank.
Yeah.
And when you go in, they are trying to impose on you other third-party service providers who are more expensive than what you can otherwise get in the market if you are given freedom to seek, the service providers on your own. So, in a nutshell, that basically is our mandate. Yes.
Okay. So, over the years, how do we actually how have we seen this mandate established in the country? What are some things that we've actually done to see improvement, curtailing of certain things amongst consumers in Kenya?
Yes, we've done quite a bit because we've been around for over 10 years. So, for instance, with regard to market conduct, which I had mentioned earlier, we have, you might be aware that recently, one of the biggest penalty we've ever been imposed is of 338 million shillings, which was pursuant to an investigation in the steel sector. 2 years ago, we had another investigation in the paints, and there we imposed on the 4 biggest players in the paint sector a penalty of 70 million.
Just tell us what did you find in your investigation? Let's start with
in
steel.
both cases, in both the steel and the paints that we had done earlier, it was about price fixing, where the operators in those particular sectors, the undertakings that are selling steel products, for instance, have an arrangement where they meet and agree on aspects of the pricing. So they say, okay, we are having challenges with this particular margin of this particular steel product, so we should not increase prices, or we should keep prices at a particular level, or we should not allow imports of raw materials, that kind of thing. Because, of course, if you don't import raw materials, it means that whatever is in the country then, you're imposing scarcity in the supply chain with the ultimate aim of increasing prices.
Yeah.
So that is with regard to market.
So how do you make those findings? For example, because you've said it appears to be collusion.
Yes.
For you to actually come and impose, you need to prove that there was a meeting that was held,
yes,
and the players agreed to this. How do you get that?
Yes. First of all, the issue would be, how do you know that there is some collusion going on in a particular sector?
Yeah.
So that is a lot of information in terms of you have to be, alert and monitor various sectors. And for instance, the steel sector, basically the key ingredient in steel is imported. So you're looking at world prices. How are the world prices going, and how is the local price, corresponding, with the international prices of the raw material. Now, in that case, after monitoring for a period of over a year, we realized that there was no relationship. The prices would move either way. So you find a scenario where international prices are going up, but the local prices are either very high compared to what you have in international prices, or sometimes when even the international prices come down, still our local prices are
remain
going
high.
up. So basically, it means that there's no relationship between that. So with regard to how then we actualize that suspicion, is that after establishing that there's a challenge in terms of we're not seeing the prices are not correlating with each other, we carried out a raid, what we call a raid in our context, essentially a search operation.
Okay.
So you do surveillance, you identify the key players in that sector, their respective market shares, where they are located. Then you send in a team to search, like a premise like here. You come in, you basically go through the various offices with a view of collecting particular sets of information that will aid you, in establishing that there is a particular, contravention going on. So we did that search in 9 farms, and when we were analyzing, the documents that we had obtained in that search, we realized that there was an additional number of farms that were also engaged in that practice. We could see communication, we could see WhatsApp messages. So then the number rose to 14. the total number of farms that we then now, which was subject to the investigation, that then resulted in the penalty. Yes, but also it's good to mention that you don't just search, get information, and sanction somebody. We have to allow them to explain themselves. So our law envisages a scenario where due process is complied with. So I'm not just accusing you, but I'm allowing you an opportunity to come and say, I think this particular price, you basically communicated to other players, and you're supposed to communicate prices with other players. You're supposed to be competing. So explain to us,
why were you discussing your price with your competition?
Explain to us why is it necessary to discuss price. Of course, they would give various reasons, which you then analyze, and if they don't add up, then that leads to a scenario where you feel comfortable that you can impose, the sanction that is provided for by the law.
Can we look at the competition just a little bit? Because there might be some confusion when it comes to then why are we talking, what exactly, or where does the competition then actually come into play? So what we are looking at in the market is stabilization of prices, trying to make sure that at least the prices across product are more or less around the same, or are we saying that in the process of production, you're making sure that you are competitive in nature, whereby everybody's on the same level playing field? Where does the aspect of competition now really come into play here when we're talking about the market?
First of all, just to be clear, we do not protect competitors. We're not after protecting the various entities that are competing. We are after protecting the process. You might be aware that many years ago we had what I would call a command economy, where the government used to set prices for basics. Now, subsequently, we liberalized the economy. And when you liberalize an economy, it's important to ensure that the players in the economy are not colluding. And because the effect of that is that if they were allowed to collude, the prices would be kept at a very high level. You want to ensure that the players are, offering a service or offering a good, but that the prices are signaled by the market. So that's basically what we say when you say competition. That's what we mean.
Yes.
That you allow the prices to be signaled by the market, and the benefits of that are that you ensure that then the consumer, who is at the tail end of any service or good that is being sold, gets prices that are competitive, that you can always find a product that suits your purchasing
Your budget,
power.
Right.
You also ensure that I have choice as a consumer, because otherwise, if people are not competing, there will be no motivation to offer a variety of goods to remain in the market. And lastly, that you ensure that also there's innovation. That somebody has to innovate to remain in the market, because otherwise then they'll be forced to exit.
How would you know if there was artificial pricing as the authority? Because you said, let's make sure that the pricing is signaled by the market, right? Across board. How would you know that the otherwise was the case?
It would depend on the monitoring I talked about. So like you would be seeing, first of all, you would be alive, you'd be in the country, so you'll be hearing people say the price of steel pipes has gone up, or the price of plastic pipes has gone up. Then that would make the authority want to find out why have people, market players, complaining about the price of this product. And then from there, then you go and inquire historically what have the prices been, which kind of raw materials go into this particular sector. What kind of fixed costs do they have? So you have some kind of analysis. And then from there, then you can determine whether the price increase is warranted, it's the normal course of business, or there is some kind of agreement among the players. Then that will elicit the kind of reaction that...
But if there's some instances where we see some players in a certain sector complaining about government interventions that seem to favor some players in the same sector. For example, recently we've had the issue of cement and clinker, an imposition of, let's say, import restrictions and higher import duty for certain products, or higher duties to export raw material in the case of mining, right? In those areas, what do you do? Let's take the case of mining, right, on iron ore. So people who are in the mining sector in the country say, we've been exporting our raw material, and we've been it's been easy for us to export. Right now, the government has come in with new restrictions and a new policy that then makes it harder for us to export, but we are sort of then being forced to supply to a limited number of local dealers in this. That creates a monopoly with those local dealers.
Maybe how I will respond to your question is first to appreciate the fact that competition policy is a subset of trade policy. So that, for instance, the issue you raised around clinker, the issue in clinker was that you need some kind of what I would call a significant capital outlay to be in a position to produce your own clinker. So in our market, you have players that have invested in clinker production, and you have players that have not invested in clinker production. So initially, when that proposal was made like 3 years ago, as part of our duty to advise the state, the government, we actually informed them that there was need. We appreciate, first of all, the need to have, as much as possible, any product that we can produce locally. We shouldn't be importing. So that makes a lot of sense. It's a rational thing. But then we felt that if you impose that clinker that duty, which then means that it becomes more expensive to import for those players who have to import to then manufacture cement. If it was going to be imposed, then our view was that you needed to give these other players time to then install the facilities. That was our advice then. That was like 3 years ago. So my perspective would be that then, because there was an intention by the state to impose duty on clinker.
Let's call it to promote local
and promote local clinker production. If I'm a player in that sector and the state has signaled that is the intention, I should do something so that by the time then the duties were imposed in the last financial year, you should have a mechanism of producing your own clinker. That's how I would see it. So there shouldn't be an issue there. There shouldn't be an issue there, because you've had time to invest, and you might be aware that people who play in the cement sector they have significant financial muscle. So it's not something that is very difficult for them to do.
I know probably we'll delve into this, as the conversation progresses. But when we talk then about competition across product, there are other things apparently that influence the work or the interventions that the authority has put in place over the last so many years. And we look at things like employment, climate change, manufacturing, all of these things that play a role in the work that you do. How do they? And I wanted to look at something like climate change, first of all, and how this affects some of the interventions that you put in place when it comes to competition in consumerism.
Yes, that is pursuant to what I mentioned earlier about our consumer protection mandate. And that, just like we have the World Competition Day, we also have a consumer rights day. And the theme, for instance, for last year was on sustainable consumption, where we also promoting, and this is also pursuant to United Nations principles on consumer protection, where you encourage sustainable consumption, appreciating the fact that we have finite resources, and that there are certain products that you consume that then promote climate, address the issues of climate change. Then there are others that would make the situation worse. So that is an area where we have been undertaking advocacy, basically informing people that you need to make a conscious decision as a consumer to consume those products that are climate friendly. So that is something that is ongoing, and it's something that is we are doing currently. Yes,
we are celebrating World Competition Day, and this morning hosting Boniface Makongo. He is the Director of Competition and Consumer Protection at the Competition Authority of Kenya. The mandate that you've told us that you have market structure, looking at the structure, and then of course avoiding monopolies and such, and looking at mergers and acquisitions and seeing how those things happen, market conduct, how different players in the market in a particular sector are behaving, abuse of buyer power, consumer protection. Give us instances of abuse of buyer power where you have had to intervene, or where it makes sense for the competition authority to intervene.
With regard to abuse of buyer power, first of all, just to give a background, abuse of buyer power was an additional mandate area that was I think through an enactment in 2019, where our act was amended to provide for that. And the reason for that was we had a lot of challenges in the retail sector, where firms were, for lack of a better word, collapsing with suppliers' money.
Yep.
So you had a scenario in the retail sector, especially where people would supply goods to supermarkets, and the ones that collapsed. Then they would fail to pay you. So instead of paying you, they are opening up another branch in another town, or they are opening up a branch in a different country.
Yeah.
So ultimately, of course, the amounts that they owe you continue to pile up, and ultimately they can't pay at all, and some of them had to exit the market. So that's why we got that mandate, basically to empower the authority to investigate and sanction instances of abuse of buyer power. So some of the investigations we've done have been largely in the retail and also in insurance sector. Insurance focusing on the small garages, where you have somebody has, you have an accident, you take a vehicle to a garage,
Yep.
The insurance company has challenges paying, and that kind of thing. So some of the ones that I can mention is we had, before Tuskies collapsed, when they were in the process of collapsing, which is actually when we had just started, enforcement of abuse of buyer power contraventions. We were able to rescue or ensure payment of 2.5 billion shillings to a lot of suppliers. And unfortunately, they were not able to pay everything they owed, and they went the way they went. But that is a case I have that we successfully managed to get some payments, even though the farm ultimately collapsed. Now, subsequently, we don't want scenarios where farms are collapsing and we are assisting, in getting something. We are empowered by the law to carry out, to have some kind of prudential arrangements, where you when you hear that there's a supermarket, for instance, that is having challenges paying, we become proactive. We go in and say, we have information that you're not paying, your suppliers, and therefore we have that we can impose, monitor sector and that kind of thing. And based on that, we have not seen any challenges in the sector for now. We have also, pursuant to the provisions of our act, ensured that the suppliers and the retailers that they depend on to access the market have a code of conduct, which is a legal document based on the provisions of the Competition Act. And this basically the objective of that code of conduct is to ensure that there are agreed terms on various aspects, of how they'll deal with each other, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. We also have a standard contract, which we have come up with, with the assistance, of course, and participation of the players in the sector. All these are aimed at ensuring that these sectors are streamlined. And that, because, when you have the collapse of a big retailer, like, say, Nakumat, what you don't see is how many smaller SMEs that also go with it, So you want to ensure as much as possible that you don't reach that stage, that you're able to treat whatever, symptoms there are, so that you don't get to a terminal, level.
So is it a requirement of the law and even the competition authority law for such relationships to have a binding contract?
Right now, it's a requirement.
And it's written. And that binding contract must have a code of conduct.
Yes.
These are the terms, and in the event of default or disagreement, this is the route to be taken.
Yes. So maybe just to enlighten you on that area, the code of conduct is separate from the term. So you have a requirement that now we have written contracts.
Okay.
Previously, we had a lot of oral contracts, which were abused significantly because, people would say, look, I thought this was a term, I thought this is what we agreed on. And because it has not been reduced to writing, then you don't have, something to refer to when there is a conflict. Now, that is now a requirement that you have a written contract, with suppliers. And with regard to the other issue that you've raised about the code of conduct, that is a requirement of our law. That you come up with a code of conduct, you liaise with government agencies like the AGs, you also, engage the stakeholders. The code of conduct lays out what I would call elaborate, provisions that, would guide and ensure that a particular sector is streamlined. So you would have provisions on, for instance, if I supply perishable goods, after how long should I be paid? Generally for the sector, not to the individual. So you can reduce that, and most of that can be reduced into the written contract. But it's also in the code. So the code is basically oversees, and the code also provides for an amicable resolution in case there's conflict. As the first port of call. So that when you disagree, because again, you have to appreciate that in the cases of abuse of buyer power, I'm supplying through you. So it's in my interest that we have an amicable resolution of whatever, conflicts we have. Before now it becomes, adversarial, and maybe you come to the authority, where we also empowered, to investigate and impose even a penalty of up to 10% of turnover. We've not done that so far. But that is something that we are empowered to do. But equally on our end, because we appreciate the importance of relationships, in terms of, people who supply goods to each other, we also try and ensure that if it's possible, the parties can talk and agree. Yes.
So, obviously there's a law that governs this sector. Yes. This is what we're talking about. And it's upon that that then you're able to set the law. I just thought about it, that then the authority almost serves kind of like a referee, making sure that everybody's playing this game properly.
Yes.
Okay. So what happens when there's contravention of the law by players in this field? Sanctions, things like that. And what then do you actually bring into play? Beyond fines, is there anything else that would happen? Because, I breach, I pay a fine, and then we keep it moving. Or does something else then make sure that there are markers in place to ensure that this certain level is kept?
Yes, so there are a lot of remedies that are provided for, in terms of which we can opt for. But the most significant is the penalty that I talked about. There's also a provision for a criminal penalty where you can do a prosecution of an entity, and there's a fine of up to 10 million. This time now, a fine imposed by a court pursuant to the criminal process, up to 10 million shillings. Or imprisonment of the directors of that entity of up to 5 years. So that is also provided for, though that has not been invoked because of the challenges of prosecution in this country. So that is also additionally provided for. But as I've mentioned, we also do not want a scenario where we just wait to penalize. Because now, as I mentioned, when a farm collapses, it collapses with many other farms.
Yeah.
So the interest of the authorities is to ensure that we have a streamlined sector. We monitor the sector to ensure that if we hear that there is, because we work very closely with the stakeholders in very many sectors. So if we hear that there is, challenges with payment, we have to, come in proactively to ensure that that is addressed before it becomes, a mountain that,
it's insurmountable.
Yes. So that is how we look at, and that's how we approach, specifically on the issue of buyer power.
Right.
But with regard to the issue of market conduct, there's no, that is different. If people are in a cartel, there's no negotiation.
With whom?
You impose the penalty.
There you have to impose a penalty. Because you see, this is conduct that you have.
You have 6 months to regularize.
Yes, this is conduct that you have to deter, because it's very negative to consumers.
It's interesting that you bring that up. Does the authority then realize, or what's the word I want to say, acknowledge then the existence of cartels? Because when we talk about markets, when we talk about consumerism, we then cannot do that without mentioning the big C, which exists and has shut some people out of the market and have controlled the way in which things happen. So one would then expect that the authority is clamping down on these cartels with great vim and vigor.
Yes, we are. Yes, yeah. And I mentioned the two, major cases we've done. We've also done many other cases in other sectors. We've done cases in outdoor advertising. We have investigated and sanctioned, players in the paint sector, for instance. Yeah, so that is something that we do. And our law acknowledges that there is collusion. And it's not only in Kenya. It's a worldwide thing, that you have collusion, in very many sectors. But of course, to remedy that, you have to have done an investigation, obtained evidence, which then can form the basis of whatever remedy you pursue. And this is ongoing. And I will also encourage you, in case you are aware of a particular sector where, there is some kind of cartel going on.
Blow the whistle.
You should blow the whistle so that we interrogate that sector.
I have one I want to blow the whistle on.
Here we go.
About abuse of BiPower. The government of the Republic of Kenya. Suspending bills is basically abuse of BiPower, isn't it?
Yes, you could argue that way, but unfortunately, in the case of the government, that does not fall within the mandate of the authority. We are mandated to deal with entities that are engaged in trade. And ordinarily, the business of the state is
the
not
government
trade.
is not involved in commercial business.
Yes, but I'm also aware that the government has realized that there's a challenge with pending bills. There has been an amendment, I believe, to the regulations on procurement that provide for some interest to, in case there's delay in payment after a supplier or has submitted all the required documents. There's some interest that's supposed to accrue until the debt is paid in full. Yes, but I think it's also very it's a big challenge in terms of even the amounts involved.
Because you see, sometimes it may come from, this is a major supplier to government who's an aggregator of smaller suppliers, right? So smaller suppliers bring to me, and then I then supply in a big way to a state agency, to a government agency. So when the smaller suppliers complain that I'm not paying them on time, and you come to me as the authority and I tell you, you know what, I'm owed 500 billion shillings by the government, what will you do?
No, as I mentioned, that does not fall within our mandate. That does not fall within our mandate. But the state is aware. I think the government has been taking measures to address the issues of pending bills and encouraging that they be settled. But that I'm aware of. Yes, but that does not fall within our mandate.
I can't imagine that with the things that you've mentioned, that the authority then works alone. That there must be other agencies of whose assistance you then, work with. And who are those, and who are those who come into play with some of these things that you would want to do?
Yes, we work with very many other government agencies. And also we work very closely with a lot of stakeholders in the private sector. So with regard to government agencies, we work very closely with a lot of sector regulators. So the CBK, Communications Authority of Kenya, the Public Procurement Authority, and also IRA, in terms of the government. With regard to our consumer protection mandate, we work very closely with KEBS because of standards, because that is part of consumer protection. Private agencies, we work very closely with, because of course we investigate private entities. So we work very closely with CAM, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, in terms of sensitization on various aspects of our mandate, because they bring together a lot of the sectors in the private. We also work closely with law firms, because we have a lot of law firms which are either prosecuting matters before us or bringing complaints to us. Yes, so we work very closely with a lot of, and equally the police. So for instance, when you're doing a raid, you need security, otherwise you may not get you may not get access to the premises you want to search. So we work very closely with many other government agencies. Yes.
Must you seek a court order before you conduct a raid?
Our law does not require that, but we normally do that out of abundance of caution. It's better when you seek a court order, because then you're able to prove to a court of law that there's a probable cause, that warrants the kind of cause of action you're proposing. Yes.
There are some cases, there are some industries where, I mean, they're new. Let's say in the digital lending space,
Yes.
or in the technology space,
Yes.
where you'll find only one or two players, the ones that are in operation. How would you deal with the issues of competition, of one player being a dominant player and such?
Now, as I mentioned, first of all, it's good to appreciate the fact that being dominant is not a crime or is not a contravention of the act in itself. Because firms gain dominance through innovation, through strategy, that they adopt,
Yep.
which then brings in the critical mass, What the law prohibits is when you abuse your dominance.
Right.
So, for instance, if you engage in predatory pricing, or if you're fixing prices, or if you're engaged in acts of, you're imposing conditions that are not necessary, on players. So one set of players, you're offering the same service, but one set of players, you're pricing maybe the product at 10 shillings, another set at 5 shillings. Those kind of things are what warrant the authority then to investigate and sanction. But specifically with regard to digital lending, digital lending has a lot of players. It has a lot of players
Now.
currently.
Yes.
Previously, for instance, we had Uber. When Uber was coming in,
Yeah.
it was an issue.
Yeah.
But one thing I need to mention is that with regard to the digital space, it's a very dynamic area. So even if somebody comes in, and looks like they're going to be, dominant for some time, there's a tendency in which it's very easy for others to crop up. Like you might have noticed now in the Uber, digital cabs, you now have a lot of players. We even have players in, limited to particular towns.
Yes.
You see. So there's a way in which the digital space competition tends to just basically grow on its own, depending, of course, on how lucrative players deem a particular sector to be. Yes. The only area that maybe you could say that is not as easy to replicate and, and entry might be limited is in the telecommunication space. But that is also regulated by the Communications Authority of Kenya. Yes.
In the financial services sector,
Yes.
this is one area where there's many cases and instances of allegations of abuse of power. I don't know whether this is buyer power or lender power, where a financial institution is attracting you to come and borrow from them. And then, of course, there's that whole fine print which says, the interest shall vary depending on, and it shall be almost like the sole discretion of the lender to vary interest. Seldom downwards, always upwards. How do you protect a consumer from this? Because it looks like predatory lending, where you're starting at a certain base rate. There's a lot of fine print that then gives the lender so much power in terms of when they can immediately start exercising this other power.
Yes, I think that is also with regard to lending. We did a banking inquiry. We've done some inquiry in the banking sector, and we realized one of the challenges in this country is that consumers are not very sophisticated. So that you go to a particular bank, you do not try and see who else is offering a better, facility, or what are the other players offering.
Yeah.
So we have a challenge in that, in the sense that
we don't shop for loans.
We don't shop for loans. We don't look at what other banks are offering.
Yeah.
But specific to the financial sector, one of the interventions we've done has been in the mortgages. To address specifically the issues you're raising. So we had all the entities in this country that offer mortgages. We reviewed their contracts to ensure that their terms and conditions are compliant with the provisions of the Act. Yes. So that you're not taken advantage of. Sometimes there's a tendency by in fact, financial institutions in Kenya sometimes, it's not even in the terms and conditions.
Yep.
They would vary things, they would change, goalposts. Of course, because I think in our context, they do not expect to be challenged.
Right.
But at the authority, we've seen now a lot of Kenyans who've become very, very, very keen on the kind of financial services that are being offered. So one of the matters we've handled recently involved an entity that was offering, a credit card.
Yeah.
And they had been given certain assurances in terms of what charges were due on that card if it's not been used.
Yeah.
But then the entity went ahead and changed the terms midstream, and we had to remedy that. So they were refunded some money, that kind of thing. Yeah. So when you come to us, we'll address your issue, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. We have that kind of our mandate empowers us to do that.
Okay. Is the authority prescriptive in nature? So are you able to tell the market what to do, or do you just then regulate and make sure that things are? Because when we look at market forces, then feeding into what the pricing of certain commodities will be, those are market forces that determine that,
Yes.
right? You know how much you put into production, so you're going to calculate profit, and then this is what I'm going to sell it at. So as we come into this, the authority then comes in to make sure that if this thing is 100 shillings and it's retailing at 100 shillings, there's not somebody who is selling the very same thing at 300 shillings for whatever reason. You come in and ask the questions and say, can we look at this a little bit and see what could be the reasons why you do this? And if the person or if this entity gives sufficient or adequate justification for that action, would the authority then say, all right, it makes sense? Or is it to really then make sure that this balance then exists across board?
Yes, I think I need to be very clear there. We do not engage in price fixing. So you are at liberty, to sell your product at
whatever price,
100 shillings. Somebody else will offer the same product at maybe 1,000, whatever reasons. There's nothing wrong with doing that, because then the consumer, based on their purchasing power, would choose which product they can afford. So if you're offering the same product at 1,000 shillings, probably you need somebody who has more resources. If I have less resources, I have an option of going for the product that is going at 100 shillings. That's why I talked about the competition process ensuring choice. So the only, it only becomes an issue for the authority if the people who are offering these products are agreeing. Because the ideal scenario is every good and service in the economy, the price should be signaled by the market forces. But when you start saying that, okay, let's agree on selling these products at maybe a range between 100 and 110, and we are the only people offering that product, then that becomes an issue for us. But if you're not doing that and you're offering at whatever price, we have no issue. We do not look at the issue of which price is going forward. No, that is not part of our mandate.
Would you say then the act that guides all of this then is effective? Has it been effective in terms of what the mandate is? Has it been effective in making sure that these issues that you talk about then are actually carried out down to the level where we may not have eyes everywhere?
I would say yes. So far, I think based on the cases we've handled and the remedies we've imposed, the act is very effective. However, there might be challenges that require amendments here and there, to make the act more effective. And those are being pursued, with the relevant government agencies. But based on the mandate as it is right now, we have done a fairly good job. Even compared, because when you say you're doing a good job, then somebody would ask you compared to whom? Then in our case, then we compare ourselves to the region, because we are in Africa, we are in COMESA, we are in EAC, and I think on the continent other than South Africa, in enforcement of competition and consumer protection, we could be next. Yes.
In conclusion, how does one get in touch with the authority?
The authority we can get in touch with the authority on our website. We have on our website there's a complaints form. So if you have a complaint in any of the issues that I raised, we also have, of course, a telephone. We're also on social media. Those are some of the modes in which you can get in touch with the authority. Yes.
So one goes and Google searches the Competition Authority of Kenya, find the website, and you'll find all those
all those, including, you can make a call, you can walk in. We are based at CBK Pension, but we are still in the process of moving offices. So if you wanted a physical meeting, you are allowed to walk in for now, but effectively we'll have moved in by around early January.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Asante sana.
And for enlightening us. Boniface Makongo is the Director of Competition and Consumer Protection at the Competition Authority of Kenya World Competition Day 2023.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.